Hey everyone, welcome back to another Adobe XD tutorial, and today we're doing something very different. Now, Adobe XD doesn't support multiple hover animations with one element. In today's video, we'll be creating this cool multiple hover animation tutorial where we can animate multiple objects inside each other. Now, before we start this video, if you like my channel, if you like what I post, then go ahead and share this video on Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, wherever you like to share content. And you can also join my Telegram channel, which is bit.ly/Punit Telegram. So for this tutorial, I have gone ahead and I have created this cool gradient background for you guys, which is just basically 4 rectangles with different gradients. The next step is to actually create the center button. And in this case, this will be this white colored button which suits the screen. I will also make a simple shadow for this by duplicating this and making sure the second rectangle is actually less wide than as compared to this. I'll make sure that the second rectangle is black in color, and I go to this black background blur option, select the checkbox right here, and from this arrow I will go to object blur. Object blur is what we want, and it can be as much as you want. For this one, I'll just choose something like 15, and I'll reduce the opacity of this to 25%. Make sure it's behind this rectangle as well. As you can see now, there's this kind of complex shadow that we have created. The next step is to actually place the text. Inside this box, we will place hover, and we'll make sure that the size of this text is larger and place it inside the rectangle just like this. I'll make sure that this is bold. Now this design in itself looks really good. Now comes the slightly tricky part, so pay attention guys. I will copy this rectangle here on this artboard, so we have 2 identical white rectangles. I will place this rectangle over our previous rectangle, which is our hover button, and make sure it's perfectly placed in the center. Now what I will do is go to the assets panel on the left, and I'll make sure that I've selected these background color rectangles, which is basically rectangle 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I will also duplicate these by clicking on the keyboard Command D or Control D. Now, as you can see, we have duplicate couple of these rectangles, 19, 20, 21, and 22. So we will select 19, 20, 21, and 22 only. You can select multiple objects by holding Command or Control and just selecting the objects that you want. And we will also hold Command or Control and press this white button here. And I will go ahead and press Command Shift M or Control Shift M to mask these. And as you can see, we have this kind of multicolored rectangle in the center, which is essentially a basic mask named Mask Group 3 in my case. Now, while this rectangle is placed here, I will click on this Mask Group 3 here on the left. And while I have all these various rectangles selected, I'll just make them smaller so as to not cover this mask. And I will randomly select them, make sure they're smaller than the rectangle here and outside the mask essentially. Now that everything is set up, we will do one more thing. We will select the text here. I'll go to Object and I'll say Path, Convert to Path. Now the shortcut for this is Command 8 or Control 8 on Windows. And once you've done this, your hover is now converted into a path which you can edit any way you like. So to create the hover animation, what we'll do is select everything on the artboard, which you can select from this layers panel on the left as well. And I'll say Command K to actually make this into a component. If you go to the right here, you can see this default state. And right next to default state, we have this plus icon. If I click on this plus icon, I get two options. Here I want to select hover state, and I'll deselect everything. Now, while hover state is selected, I want to make some changes on this artboard right here. So the first thing I'll do is select these colorful rectangles which I had placed earlier, select all four of them and make them much smaller. I'll scale them down till the point that they're behind this button rectangular here, and I'll adjust these layers so that the colorful rectangles are hidden behind this button. Make sure they're also placed in the center. Now we have this hover button which is just hovering over here. While hover state is selected, I'll click on this artboard and I'll say Command D or Control D. Now here what I want to do is I want to ungroup this component. So I'll say Command Shift G to ungroup the component. Next thing I'll do, I'll click on hover. Now I'll click on hover and I'll say Command K or Control K on the keyboard. So that hover is now in itself a component. I'll click on this plus icon right next to default state once again, and I'll say hover state. Now while hover state is selected, what I want to do is double click inside this component till these little dots appear. Now these dots are anchor points which you can fiddle around with and play with the shape. So for H, what I'll do is I'll drag the top left and the bottom left anchor points to the extreme right here. As you can see, we can only see these two blocks now, and the line here has disappeared almost. I'll do something like this for all these shapes. You can experiment on your own and make your own kind of text effects. But for right now, I will just skip this part so that we can get to the good part. I've made some very weird changes to these shapes, but they kind of look cool. And what I'll also do is place this hover text again, make sure that the opacity is around, say, 25%. Now, the person won't be lost, hey, where did my text go? It looks good and it kind of transforms into this cool shape. If I go back to default state, it comes back to the default state. So I'll keep it on default state for right here. And here in this case also, I'll make sure that now comes the controversial part. There's no real support for multi-hover in Adobe XD as of right now, but we have some workarounds. So let's try this out. So if I go to prototype, and inside prototype, I drag this arrow to the second artboard. I'll say keys and gamepad, and in my case, I'll say the right arrow key. So this could be anything based on your preference. And from auto animate, I'll change it to transition. This is probably the first time we've changed auto animate back to transition, but for this trick, we'll have to do this. And make sure that artboard 2 is selected, and animation I'll say none so that the easing and duration options fade out, and that's about it. Make sure that our hover transitions are set up. This is already the hover transition, ease out 0.3 seconds. This is more or less fine. I'll just change this to ease in out. And here in this component also, I'll say hover state and ease in out, of course, 0.5 seconds for this one. And that's about it. Now, while this artboard is selected, I'll click on this play icon right here. And if I hover over this rectangle, it will hover this color in the background. And if I press the right arrow key, it will now hover this text as well. That's one of the only workarounds that we have, and it works pretty well. We can switch between artboards as well. If in this artboard, we want the hover state to come back to this first artboard, we will just bring this arrow to the first artboard again, press the left arrow key in this case, and I'll transition, and I'll set the animation to none as well. I hope you liked that little tutorial I did. I have so many hacks that I do on my videos, so I hope you can subscribe to the channel, and I'll post every Monday and Thursday. I hope you like this video. I'll see you in the next one. God bless.